They were the heroes from the future, teenagers protecting the universe from those that would sow the seeds of chaos. Each had unique powers and abilities, and though they often had their differences, they came together to save the day as the Legion of Superheroes. Now, you can be a part of their adventures and learn the history of the future in the Legion Clubhouse.
So, Matthew, before we get into this week's episode, do you remember how I said that Jerry Siegel was not content to let anyone else steal his thunder, so therefore he was secretly rewriting the history of the Legion of Superheroes?
Yes.
Turns out, Jerry Siegel is credited as creating Supergirl.
Really?
Yes, and this is how it went down. Now, everyone knows, we can go into the comic books, right there's Otto Bender creating Supergirl, right. And yet today we say Supergirl is created by Jerry Siegel. It all boils down to derivative work.
Ah. So even though Supergirl was created by Binder and Kurt Swan maybe, or Jim Mooney maybe?
Yeah, I forget who the artist was on that.
I want to say Mooney, but it's still considered a derivative work of Siegel's Superman creation in 19th. Oh wow.
Yeah. So yeah, I don't know. I'm sure Siegel was long gone by the time that this thing came down. But somewhere Otto Bender is rolling in his grave, and I feel sorry for Otto Bender.
Adventure Comics number 293, The Legion of Super Traders, published March 1962, written by Jerry Siegel with art by Kurt Swan. A threat too dire for superheroes leads to the creation of an orthodox new league. Are you ready for the Super Pets?
So let's talk about the Legion of Super Traders.
Legion of Super Traders. So for the fourth time, I think we're kind of getting the same story. Well, it's not as overt here. I don't think it's exactly the same story. But this time the kids from the future have come back to prank him in a murderous way.
Yes, they're going to shoot him down with green kryptonite rays from their fingers or something.
Yeah, and they're going to let all of the bad guys out of the Phantom Zone. And they're going to try and destroy him because they are secretly under the control of the brain globes from Rambat.
Oh my gosh, if you can't read Adventure Comics 293 and instantly think of a Futurama episode with the giant brains,
we are leaving now for no reason.
As soon as I got to the giant brains and globes, I was like, holy crap. Okay, very well done, Futurama.
Totally sold. Yeah.
Yeah.
But this is an episode that really starts out with that same sort of thing, but then we discover that the teens from the future are being controlled and bad things are happening, and no one can save Superboy because their brains are being controlled, and any brain that is sufficiently advanced to have superpowers could be controlled by a brain globe. I mean, really what you'd need would be some sort of superpowered animal.
Something that is not as smart as a human, that's for sure. Now, the brains in a globe, they want to move Earth to another solar system.
They want to steal it and put it under a purple sun.
Which is, they do know, these brains in a globe that are so smart, they do know that once Earth leaves its solar system, it's going to freeze into an ice cube. And when it thaws out, there's going to be a lot of freezer burn all over the place. So this may not be the most brilliant plan in the world.
Okay. Can I just say, in rebuttal, 1962.
You can definitely say that, but I will continue to point out the problems in all of these plots.
Yeah, moving a planet, you would destroy the planet if you're going to move it under a purple sun, especially if you're going to do it by hand.
I wonder if there's purple rain on under a purple sun.
I believe there is. Purple rain.
Interesting. Purple rain. A couple of other things that probably should be pointed out. At this time in the Superboy history, the Kents are not farmers.
No, Jonathan Kent sold the Kent farm and bought the Smallville General Store in the 1960s. So Superboy is actually working, as this issue opens, in the Kent store, the general store of Smallville, approximately 10 years ago, which at this time would be 1950 something, 52, 53.
Yeah, this is 62 is when this issue came out.
Yep. So Superboy generally takes place about 10 years in the past of whatever the temporal center of the past time
Okay.
is.
Mm-hmm.
Right. So whatever the past is, then 10 years beyond that is where Superboy would be.
Mm-hmm. So Superboy falls under the control of these brain globe things,
globes.
or is somehow influenced by them, because
Yes.
he picks up poor Crypto and starts swinging him around by the tail. Now, this is the second time in 5 Legion Clubhouse episodes where Superman has picked up, or Superboy has picked up an animal by the tail and has swung it around. I'm beginning to think that Superboy does not like animals.
There is something very unpleasant there. And this is his own pet dog. This is his dog that he's had since before he left Krypton.
Mm-hmm.
So I think there's definitely some sort of psychological issues. I mean, your whole planet dies. You maybe have some abandonment issues. I just hope you don't take it out on the poor dog.
I hope for some reason you don't assume that some other person is your brother and secretly try to kill him. Oh, which reminds me, you mentioned that these fake Legion members, we'll call them the super traders, the mind-controlled Legion, they show the Phantom Zone projector, right?
Right.
And in there we see Jaxor, which is kind of cool. We see
Quetzal.
General Zod.
Yes.
Is name checked in here. And
we see
there's Mon-El still trapped in the Phantom Zone at some point when I can get him out in the future. Holy crap, I never expected them to re-show Mon-El in a Legion book, especially this soon, where they're trying to remind people, hey, remember, Superman or Superboy did give him lead poisoning, had to put him into the Phantom Zone, and because of that, it is something that literally haunts Superboy for the rest of his life.
Yeah, and it's fascinating to see that. It's been in real time. These issues would have come out about a year apart, I think. And just to see that kind of continuity gatekeeping in a book of this vintage is pretty amazing. I mean, I believe there may have actually been another Mon-El appearance in a Superman story somewhere in between. But even so, just the fact that they're calling back to that Superboy story, that's pretty impressive to me.
I think so too. Now, again, both of those are Siegel joints.
Yeah.
But I still thought that was pretty impressive.
Are we sure that Superboy 89 wasn't a Bernstein?
Oh, no, that is a Bernstein. Sorry.
Yeah.
Oh, so here's Siegel once again trying to say, I created the Mon-El of the Phantom Zone, only me.
Yeah, see, and it's my Superboy.
When did it move from the time bubble to the time cabinet? That was something that popped up. The Legion show up and they said, we have exited our time cabinet to come and visit you. And I was like, wait a minute, I thought this was a time bubble.
This is the first time I've ever heard the term time cabinet, and frankly, I don't want to hear it again.
Me neither. This was horrible. And in fact, there's some continuity issues going on in this issue because at some point, there are 2 time bubbles present in the background. Why is that? I didn't understand. There's not like a second group that has suddenly appeared. It's just like, there's a second time bubble. Okay.
Time bubble. It's cool.
Is it?
Well, yeah, it kind of is, because one of them came from the past and the other one came from the past of the future.
I don't think so.
Or you don't think so?
No. I think there's something
somebody
else.
Messed up?
I honestly think when I read this, I was like, oh, here's somebody that messed up. But then again, here's an opportunity for a perfect future story where they come back to that same story again in the future and they're observing and nobody notices that there's a second time bubble.
That the Legionnaires are actually there.
Yeah.
Well, in that panel, it has to be noted that Cosmic Boy is using his magnetic abilities to destroy the Superboy androids.
Right.
So, people are probably looking up at the flying disembodied limbs.
It's interesting. It was something that really popped up. But so the stars of this issue are not the Legion of Superheroes.
Oh, no.
Not Superboy.
No.
Not Ghost Mon-El, who tries to get out of the Phantom Zone.
Right.
But the Legion of Super Pets.
The Super Pets. From the planet Krypton, Crypto the Super Dog. From 20 years in the future, Midvale. Streaky, the super cat. From probably one of the dumber stories of the pre-crisis DC universe, Beppo, the super monkey. And from the future of this issue,
Yes.
Comet, the super horse. This is the first appearance of Comet in our world. This is the
Right.
first time he appears. But chronologically speaking, in Supergirl's time, July of 1962, whenever this issue came out, Supergirl didn't have a horse yet.
Right. And in fact, they call it out in the issue. They're like,
Yeah.
hey, this is something that's coming up in the near future, fans. Be on the lookout
This
for
is
when Supergirl gets her horse.
Preview of when Supergirl gets a horse. To me, I want to know, is this a story where they created Super Horse and thought, hey, let's stick him in this time travel story, and then we'll use him later? Or was it we put him in here as a one-shot thing, and someone went, you know what would be good is if we actually follow up on that Super Horse thing and added a bunch of drama and made him a man who's actually a centaur, who's actually a man, who's actually a horse?
Who was the group editor at this time of the Superman comics?
Mort Weisinger.
So Mort Weisinger would have had to been very forward thinking to say, hey, let's put this editor note in here that says, hey, fans, this full story is coming in a couple of months or whenever it happened.
And that is a Weisinger thing, though. They would say, oh, look at this cool thing. And then they'd come back, and a year later, we'd be like, oh, Mon-El's still in the Phantom Zone. Or they'd be like, oh, well, let's do this Legion thing, but this time they're evil, and there's a whole Superboy planet. The creators of the Silver Age, I think, didn't intend to build continuity and didn't intend to have a huge interlocking giant universe, but within Weisinger's titles, I believe he really wanted to hook the kids, get them reading, and keep them reading with things like come back in a couple of months and see how Supergirl gets a horsey.
Right. And here's the other thing that's happening with comics. Now, when we started back in 1960. This is just a few years later. We are starting to see not the rise of the comic book shop yet, but we certainly have a number of people who are ripping the covers off of the comics because they're supposed to be destroyed. So at one point, drugstores, grocery stores, whoever was selling comics, instead of returning them, which would have been a huge cost, the comic book publishers ask that people simply rip the covers off and then destroy the comics, but mail the covers back to the publisher to get their refund or whatever that they were supposed to get from those covers.
Eventually, they would say, just strip the logo and return us the logos of any old unsold books, and your account will be credited for those non-sold issues.
So what do you do with all these extra comics? Well, maybe instead of selling them for 12 cents, maybe you sell them for a couple of pennies. Or
sell them for 5 cents.
Or maybe you just give them to some kids. So right around this time, in the 1960s and starting to probably by 64, for sure, we are starting to see people starting to collect comics and save comics and start to exchange comics. So kids who would go out and buy these strip covers or get access to these strip covers, they would trade them with one another. They would set up quote unquote shop where you'd go from one kid's house to another kid's house, and you would quote unquote buy comics or trade comics with them. So you had right around this time, you had proto comic book stores starting to appear in imaginary form, but you saw kids wanting to keep their comics longer, wanting to exchange comics, and as you said, Matthew, start to remember a lot of the continuity that's going on in these comics from year to year and month to month. So to have Mon-El appear is really cool, even though we think that there's not really strict continuity going on in these books. But also the fact that the Legion of Super Pets is a backdoor pilot for Comet the Super Horse that is in love with Supergirl, by the way, ladies and gentlemen.
Right. And he's also a man who used to be a centaur, who used to be a man, who used to be a horse.
Yeah, so it gets a little weird. But I think that is just in itself very fascinating.
Yeah.
And part of that change may be because there's this attitude change of, yes, we do want to keep readers around longer.
Yeah. And I think that maybe not just Legion specifically, but, Legion and the Superman titles certainly with these continuity building things actually helped to shape the current comic book, that secondary market, into something where people are like, oh, maybe I shouldn't throw out these books. Maybe I want to read them so that 2 months from now, when Mon-El shows up again, you can go, oh yeah, I totally have that issue where he disappeared, rather than I sold it for a Champo bar and 4 balls of bubblegum.
Yeah, so I really like the fact that we're getting continuity in here. But the other thing that is really important about this issue is the animals defeat the brains in a globe. And they're like, oh, we can never try to take over a planet where animals can kill us. We will flee.
Flee.
And so they fleed. And suddenly the Legion members are free of their delusion. And the Superboy is free of his delusion. And everyone is safe and sound back together again, except the Legion of Superheroes make the Super Pets honorary members of the Legion.
Right.
So
and
before we ever see I don't know, pick a future character, Havoc, Matter Eater Lad. Before he ever becomes a member of the Legion of Superheroes, Beppo the Super Monkey was there first,
and I think rightfully so. Beppo has Superboy powers. This is, though, another example of how being a character with an S shield and Kryptonian powers, especially in a story written by Jerry Siegel, makes you the center of attention. It makes you the man, or in this case, the ape. But it should also be noted that there is one forever long-lasting thing that happens here, and no one will ever be the same. I know I am scarred for life, seeing Lightning Lad ride into battle on the back of a flying Airedale.
Yes.
Because Saturn Girl is riding a horse, and that's all well and good. A horse is designed for this. Why is Lightning Lad riding Crypto the Super Dog? He has a flying, well, in this case, a rocket backpack. But
it just looks more interesting to see, riding the mounts into battle.
He's a dog.
I agree.
Cosmic Boy is not trying to ride Streaky the Super Cat.
So yes, I think the ASPCA is going to have a few words with the Legion of Superheroes when their timelines converge in the future.
Lightning Lad has a defense that on Wynneth, not only is everybody a twin, but dogs are used as horses, and horses are kept as pets like a gerbil, and they walk around your house in a little plastic ball.
If you enjoy the show, we would appreciate your support. You can find out more and become a Legion Clubhouse member at patreon.com/majorspoilers. Action Comics number 287, Supergirl's Greatest Challenge, published April 1962, written by Jerry Siegel with art by Jim Mooney. An alien threat deprives the Legion of their powers, leaving Supergirl to fight alone.
Matthew, what is Supergirl's greatest challenge?
Finding tights that are flesh toned that won't run, but don't let her skirt flip up and embarrass her.
Oh, okay. So, as we saw in Adventure Comics 293, where the Kents are not farmers, Action Comics 287 has Supergirl being adopted, and her parents know that she is a Supergirl.
Supergirl is actually she's adopted by Fred and Edna Lee.
Okay.
In Action 279.
Okay, cool.
Which is just like literally right after the last place we saw Supergirl, which would have been Action 276. But she, of course, had been in the Midvale orphanage in that issue and was sad and wanted her 3 Supergirl friends. And Fred and Edna, whose names change, by the way. The last time we saw them, their names are like Jeremiah and I don't remember what the mother is, but Fred Danvers, male prostitute. No, bad.
I thought it was Fred Lee.
Fred Danvers.
Oh, okay.
And Edna Danvers. It's Linda Lee Danvers.
There you go.
Got to stay with me. If I said Lee earlier, I misspoke, and I'm just going to blame that on Steven.
Okay. We also find out that Supergirl has all sorts of little gadgets and gizmos to let her know when the Legion is trying to contact her. She has a
Yes.
little model of Superhero Clubhouse, and it is called Superhero Clubhouse. It's not called Legion
Right.
of Superheroes Clubhouse.
No.
It's not called the
it's
Legion Clubhouse. It's just Superhero Clubhouse.
Yep.
It rings when they're trying to contact her, and then she has to look at 2 1/6 scale figures on the wall, and they light up to tell her who's trying to get a hold of her.
Cosmic Boy and Saturn Girl's heads are lighting up. That means they want me to join them in the future. Bye.
All right, have fun, daughter. Yes, be careful. Do you need a sandwich? Good job
Bring us
blowing up
back
that.
some stock tips.
Good job blowing up that tree. That was totally not any point of this story because.
Yeah.
So she goes to the future, and what's going on in the future?
In the future, she has been sent to the future. And of course, we do have that interesting future exhibit. But she has been called to use her many, many superpowers to destroy, I believe is it a meteor? No, it's the Positive Man.
Yeah, the Positive Man, which looks a lot. I was going to go back and look. I didn't look to see when Forbidden Planet came out, but it looks a lot like the monster of the id that we see in Forbidden Planet, and that whole sketchy, electricity monster kind of way.
Yeah, it actually does. This book came out in what? October of
61,
62?
Yeah,
Forbidden
62.
Planet was 1956.
Yeah, so there could be some influence there.
Certainly could be. In fact, I would say it's entirely likely. I'm not going to say that the Legion of Superheroes gleans and steals from anything and everything. I'm just going to say this issue was written by Jerry Siegel. And I don't know if you're familiar with Steven's theory, but Jerry Siegel may actually be secretly evil. That's why
be.
Siegel is short for Secret Evil.
Secret Evil. There you go.
Mm-hmm.
Turns out that this time the Legion of Superheroes is bad, but they're bad because they're being impersonated by a bunch of shape-shifting aliens who are not Kulins.
No, they're not. They're not Durlans, but they are called the Chameleon Men.
We ever see the Chameleon Men again?
No. But interestingly,
because they turned into Durlans.
If you've been paying attention, Chameleon Boy is in fact a member of the Legion of Superheroes at this time, although he does not appear in this issue.
No.
Which I think would be confusing.
Yes. Because he can also change his shape into something else.
Exactly. And, Chameleon. Interestingly, though, this issue does provide a second appearance for Triplicate Girl.
Yes.
And
as well as Bouncing Boy shows up.
Right. Bouncing Boy, who was last seen being rejected with Sun Boy, is now actually a member of the Legion of Superheroes and has this great moment where he says, I'm totally going to bounce. Ouch, I can't.
I know you and I are going to, when we get to Bouncing Boy's origin story, we're going to have this conversation. But to me, Bouncing Boy is not the smartest. He's not the sharpest knife in the drawer, if you know what I mean.
Chuck Tane is a sweet, wonderful.
Hey, everybody, watch me bounce. Ow!
Hey, my name's Chuck.
Chuck. I shall drink this bottle. Oh, no, I continue to drink the stretching fluid. Oh, no, woe is me.
Everybody loves Chuck Tane because
you kind of have to.
He's that sweet kid that we all had in school, but he is not the sharpest bulb at the bottom of the barrel.
Right.
Is what I'm saying.
I'm glad Bouncing Boy is in here.
Yes.
But he serves his purpose. And,
he does.
And so the nice thing is, as we're reading these issues, is without a lot of pomp and circumstance, we are seeing new members being added. Now, they may have been members that we saw trying to get into the club in the past, but when we see them again, they are full-fledged members. Now, again, someone is either forgetting the rules, or a greater time has passed than we've been led on to believe, or those rules have changed.
Well, if we look at when Supergirl was told that one boy and one girl could join per year, we know that we have Bouncing Boy and Sun Boy. So it has to have been, if the rules applied and stayed consistent, has
at
to
least
have been
2 years.
At least 2 years.
Right.
There are no new female members since Supergirl. So I'm wondering if, I'm going to tell you what actually happened.
What happened?
secretly they forgot about that one
I'm
boy
sure.
and one girl per year rule.
So Chuck
But
got in under the one boy, one girl rule as the
I
second.
think that's what happened. Chuck and Dirk came in and they're like, yeah, Chuck, yeah, he's totally a girl. It's cool.
Hey, all
And
right,
then
I'm in the club. Watch me bounce. Ow!
be nice. Bouncing Boy is one of those characters whom I love for just we'll get to it in a couple
Yes,
of episodes.
we will get
when we
to it
do
in a
this
couple of
story.
episodes. Yes.
There are a lot of things in this issue that really sell for some of them for the first time, the ongoing continuity expectation that the Legion could appear over and over and over. And one of the really good things is we see there are a lot of members of the Legion, but we see
Mm-hmm.
changing rosters.
Mm-hmm.
You pretty much always have the three founders. You tend to have Brainiac 5 in any story centered around Supergirl.
Right. And we do see
But
him in this issue saying, good
yeah,
luck.
good luck. I love you. We're all counting on you. But
Yes.
we're stay with the airplane references, it'll be fine. But we also see, Bouncing Boy for his first appearance, a second appearance of Sun Boy here from the 290 issue. I don't believe he was in the last one we read.
No, he was not.
And then, of course, we do see a continuation, or maybe a sort of a continuation from the Legion of Super Pets that we saw in just that previous issue.
Yes, because we are introduced to Wizzy.
Quizzy.
Wizzy.
Well, Supergirl is flying across the futuristic metropolis of Metropolis. Way to go there, Siegel. Put a lot of thought into that one. No. And she's suddenly interrupted by, pardon the telepathic interruption, but please give me some milk.
Wait a minute,
Great
Streaky.
Scott!
How did you get to the future with me?
Streaky, my name is Wizzy.
Wizzy? Oh, right here on the back of your collar, it explains everything.
Wizzy, descendant of famed supercat. Yes. And
He's
okay.
famous. He's famous
He is.
and he can communicate telepathically, but that doesn't mean
Yes.
that every sentient being will be able to communicate with the cat. And so by putting the entire history of Wizzy on his collar and letting them know that he's a descendant of one of the greatest super cats that ever lived,
Right.
those sentient beings that can read English will
Right.
know exactly who this cat is.
And really, he ranks right up there because, in the ranks of great battle cries, there's with great power comes great responsibility. There's more powerful than a locomotive. There's criminals are a superstitious and cowardly lot. And pardon the interruption, but please give me some milk.
Yes. So
I
really,
think that Wizzy really ranks right up there.
Supergirl gets put into the Phantom Zone.
Yes, with Wizzy. Wizzy,
Yes. Wizzy.
not Streaky. Wizzy.
And while she's in the Phantom Zone, she is able to communicate telepathically with android robot maker,
Right.
and convinces him to build a chameleon robot to go and infiltrate the Legion of Superheroes,
Right.
and thus save the day.
Yes.
Get her out of the Phantom
Well,
Zone and save the day.
Wizzy saves the day because Wizzy is the telepathic conduit that
Right.
allows her to communicate. Whoever these chameleon men are, they didn't count on the phenomenal power of Wizzy, the Whizzer Cat.
Man, I'm kind of disappointed that she didn't run into Mon-El or one of the other Phantoms of the Phantom Zone.
She actually, and this is interesting, she says, oh, it looks like everyone has been released from the Phantom Zone in the last 3 issues. Because you'll recall they were actually in the zone
Mm-hmm.
in the episode with the Legion of Super Pets. So this, though, and this is another thing that you have to look at, these early stories, if we take them at whole cloth and say that these things happened the way they're reported,
Yeah.
time has to have taken place.
Yep.
Because just last issue or the issue before when we last saw the Legion, Mon and the rest of those Phantoms.
Yeah,
No,
Zor-El,
wait,
Jax-Ur. It was just
that happened in the past, didn't it?
Yeah, it did.
Oh, so maybe the 20th century. But this actually implies then that by the time Supergirl joins the Legion, Mon-El is out.
That's interesting.
Ooh.
Interesting thought problems. So anyway, Supergirl chases all the bad guys away, and hooray, I'm gonna bounce. Ow!
I'll borrow this impenetrable dome, says Supergirl. By the way, verbatim. That is an actual quote from this issue.
Hey, so
and using the impenetrable dome,
which was foreshadowed, which was Chekhov gunned earlier in the issue.
it's not like they just made it up and put it there. They made it up and then used it 4 pages later. She then takes the chameleon men, not to be confused with the chameleon boy, into custody.
Right.
And discovers that the real Legionnaires have actually been locked in the storage bay, the back room where they keep the Twinkies and the root beer.
Yeah. They were locked into the janitor's closet and couldn't get out because that version had gone back into the past to run into Superboy and try to build a robot.
Yep. But were it not for the powers of Whizzy, Supergirl would have perished in the future in the Phantom Zone.
Yeah, and so the Legion members have lost their powers by the time that Supergirl has saved the day.
Mm-hmm.
And so for a while, she has to go around impersonating their power set.
Yes, which is kind of brilliant because she actually uses her powers in interesting ways to make it seem like they still have their abilities. So she used her super breath to make it seem like Cosmic Boy was still magnetic, and she used her heat radiation vision or something to make Sun Boy glow with magic powder.
Magic powder, yeah.
Little magic dust.
Yeah. And then they all get their powers back.
Well, of course, it's a Legion story.
Of course it is.
You get your powers back.
Now, here's the other incredible, crazy bit about this. How many pages is this story? Because Action Comics at this time, you had 2 or 3 stories going on in each issue. And we have just talked at length about a 12-page story.
Yep.
There is a lot crammed into 12 pages, ladies and gentlemen.
And we discovered that with that previous Supergirl story is they put a lot in here. It's kind of like, how modern episodes of The Simpsons start and then they'll give you a false and then another false. And sometimes you'll get 3 false leads before you realize it's a story of Homer is actually going to create radioactive beer in a vat in the backyard.
Right.
This is very much the precursor of that because these stories are incredibly complicated. And sometimes in an 8-page Supergirl story, you'll have 8 things happening. Something weird will happen on each page because this story starts with, "Oh, I'm going to go to the future. Bye, Mom. Have fun."
It starts out with Linda, the park services are going to blow up a tree, and that tree is right next to your secret tree that leads right into our secret basement lair. Maybe you should take care of it.
Before that, Linda is invited to join a Superman fan club.
Yes, with Lois Lane appearance.
With Lois Lane, yeah.
You are right. Every page is its own self-contained story. It's crazy. Yep. It is crazy how much is packed into these pages.
And Lois actually calls her out, and she's like, "Supergirl is your age and resembles you, but unlike you, she has blonde hair." And Supergirl is like, "Yeah, fortunately, these people are too dumb to realize that wigs exist."
I'm wearing a wig, yes. And then we go into the next page, and she's fighting a tree with her hands. And then she goes into the future and fights chameleon monsters. And then she has to impersonate everybody's superpowers.
Well, first she fights the positive man who takes away the Legion's powers. Oh my gosh, there's so much going on here.
There is way too much going on in here.
There is more here in these 12 pages than in 7 issues of a book written, well, I won't say any names, but it rhymes with Cryan Freikel Fendis. But I'm not bitter. I think that it does add to the expectation. It's kind of frenetic when you read it, boom, boom, boom.
Oh, yeah.
But it adds to the expectation that these early stories are constantly world building and adding things, whether the things stick around or not, because this is Whizzy's only appearance.
Oh, poor Whizzy.
Well, he gets a reprint. They reprint this story later on, but this is the only time we see Whizzy because Whizzy is actually the genetic duplicate descendant of a minor piece of Superman lore.
Mm-hmm.
But even so, they put so much into this to keep the kids of 1962 hooked.
Maybe it's part of it, I think, is because they're trying to hide the fact that this is only a 12-page story. And so you're getting what feels like 60 pages worth of comics for your 12 cents.
Right. They pack as much in as they can. And again, sometimes those stories feel incoherent, but for all his evil, Jerry Siegel is really good at doing that. And then each page has this new twist on it. And you get to the end and you kind of forget how the whole thing started, and the fact that Lois Lane was in the issue at all.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, it's really fascinating to read this and think about the process of, okay, I'm Jerry Siegel and I'm writing this 12-page Supergirl story, and I'm just, I'm writing a book every month. I'm writing many, many stories. This story has so much in it.
Mm-hmm.
It just makes you wonder if they're all like that.
Well, we will find out. Well, Matthew, we've come to another end of the Legion Clubhouse. I know it's sad times for everybody, but one thing that we can take away from this entire episode is that never discount animals.
Very much so, yeah. Never be mean to your cat, because 1,000 years from now, his descendant could save you from the Phantom Zone.
Or could fall in love with you. You never know.
Well, he was he was a man who used to be a centaur, who used to be a man, who used to be a horse.
Super Pets, where would we be without you?
In the latrine, I believe.
Next time on Legion Clubhouse, we will be taking a look at Superboy number 98 and Adventure Comics number 300. Ooh, it's going to be an important one. We'll see what happens then. Until next time, I'm glowing because of Chemical Kid.
And I'm Chameleon, not boy, not chameleon person.
The Legion Clubhouse is a production of Major Spoilers Entertainment, LLC, and is produced by Steven Schleicher. Your hosts were Matthew Peterson and Steven Schleicher. You can follow Matthew at Mighty King Cobra and Steven at Major Spoilers. You can follow this podcast on Twitter at Legion Clubhouse. If you have questions or comments, send them to podcast@majorspoilers.com. I'm Jason Inman. Until next time, eat it, Grandpa.
This podcast is copyright 2017 by Major Spoilers Entertainment, LLC.